This is my presentation for our English Aboriginals. Okay, let's start off with the first slide, please. Aboriginals, prisons, and treatment by police. Number 1. It was discovered that Aboriginal deaths in custody were a symptom of a system that disproportionately focused police attention on Aboriginal people, causing Aboriginal people to be imprisoned younger and more frequently. A system where Aboriginal people were 11 times more likely to be denied bail and jailed on remand. As a result, while Indigenous individuals in custody, who tend to be younger than the general prison population, were less likely to pass away in prison. Indigenous people overall were imprisoned at a higher rate and hence had a higher chance of passing away in custody. Indigenous people were less likely to be incarcerated at the time of their death than non-Indigenous people. 54% of all cases examined by Guardian Australia were in protective custody on remand, being arrested or being pursued by police at the time of death compared to 45% of non-Indigenous deaths. According to the Human Rights Watch research, 11 out of 14 prisons had clear signs of racism towards detainees who were Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders. One Native American prisoner described being abandoned in the yard unclothed for several hours. Disabled inmates, including Aboriginals and Islanders, spent an excessive amount of time alone for 22 hours per day due to racism, compared to non-Indigenous persons. Indigenous people had a 17.3 times higher likelihood of being detained in WA. The overrepresentation rate is 4 times higher than the national average. Between 1988 and 1995, Australia's incarceration rate for Indigenous people rose by 61%. Non-Indigenous people's incarceration has grown by 38%. Compared to non-Indigenous persons, Indigenous people had a 14.7% higher likelihood for being incarcerated in 1995. Indigenous people are more likely to be incarcerated for crimes involving motor vehicles, property crimes, assault, break-ins, and justice procedures. They are also more likely to be detained for crimes involving public order. When assault occasionally no harm is the most serious offense. Indigenous people are twice as likely to be arrested as non-Indigenous people for such an offense. They have a 3 times greater chance of being sent to prison. This suggests that the trifecta is still being used in controversial policing, which means offensive language, resisting arrest, and assaulting a police officer. The Australian Institute of Criminology carried out national police surveys in 1988, 1992, and 1995. The 1995 survey's findings are still unavailable. The number of Native Americans and non-Native Americans detained by the police in August of 1988 and 1992 is seen in an increase as well as Aboriginals, respectively. Aboriginals' employment options. The most common industries in which Indigenous people were employed in 2006 were public health administration and safety, healthcare and social assistance, education and training, retail, trades, and manufacturing. The most common industries in which non-Indigenous people were employed were retail, trade, manufacturing, and healthcare and social assistance. Indigenous females were most likely to be employed in healthcare and social assistances, public administration and safety, education and training, and retail trade. Indigenous males are most likely to be employed in public administration, safety and construction, manufacturing, healthcare, and social assistance. The Indigenous Australian Government Development Program is a 15-month program designed to improve employment opportunities and experiences within the APS for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. Participants undertake a combination of on-the-job and formal training resulting in a nationally recognized diploma-level qualification, specializing in human resources, procurement, or project management. The Australian government gives many opportunities to Aboriginal people and is continuing the support to this day. I'll be doing my famous Aboriginal person on Tanya Orman. Tanya Orman is a North Queens Island native and is a Biri and Gugu Yimi Daya. Tanya is one of Australia's youngest television executives and one of the few Aboriginal women in senior positions in the media. The CQ University Almus of the Year Industry Excellence Award, and went to one of the new Narrowcaster, a National Indigenous Television Commission editors in 2007 and took the job. Tanya took on the role of channel manager for the National Indigenous Television program for 4 years and oversaw the company's integration into the SBS network, mainstream commercial TV, and launched as a free-to-air channel for Aboriginal. She has almost years of experience, 2 decades, in Australian media and has an overseas team of over 50 employees. She listed the 2012 NITV as a free-to-air channel for Aboriginals who can all see it. She has been building the channel for almost 13 years to repay for what some of her family went through and will always represent Aboriginals to this day. Last year, during the Black Lives Matter protests, Tanya was in a unique position and the channel grew in popularity, especially in Australia. But in 2020, when thousands of people took to the streets in America following George Floyd's death at the hands of the police, Tanya was given another chance to show the importance of their voice in the Australian media landscape. When Tanya was introduced as a part of the SBS network, it became available to every Australian, making First Nation stories more accessible and allowed the community to see itself on television, which wasn't always possible on mainstream TV, according to Tanya. My next famous Australian is Oodgeroo Noonuccal. Oodgeroo was born in Minjerribah in Queensland in 1920. She had a strong connection to sand and water and her country cultures growing up. In 1942, when Auntie Oodgeroo was 21, she enlisted in the Australian Women's Army Service after her 2 siblings were captured by the Japanese in Singapore. After her military service, Oodgeroo began her long career in politics as an activist. Through her career in activism, she gained skills in writing, public speaking, and political strategy. She also began to write poetry, and in 1964 she became the first published Aboriginal poet in Australia. Her poetry strongly reflected Aboriginal culture and her political belief, and she went on to win multiple Australian awards. Thank you for listening.